The first time a stranger called Paige Mercer my girlfriend, I opened my mouth to correct her. Paige beat me to it. She blushed so hard the tips of her ears turned pink, gave me the smallest sideways smile, and said, "Don't correct her." Just like that, my whole life got louder. We were sitting in the back booth at Wanda's diner, the kind of place where the menus were laminated, the ketchup bottles were always sticky, and everybody in Briar Falls knew exactly which booth squeaked if you shifted your weight wrong. It was a Saturday afternoon, bright and ordinary, with sunlight coming through the front windows and making stripes across the old checkerboard floor. Paige wore faded jeans, white sneakers, and a soft blue t-shirt with a tiny bleach spot near the hem from the time she tried to refresh my kitchen curtains and nearly created a chemical weapon. I was in a gray hoodie and work pants because I had planned to spend the day fixing the warped steps on my back porch. Instead, I was sitting across from my best friend, watching her pretend not to notice that my brain had stopped working. My name is Adrian Cole. I'm 27, I run a small repair shop with my uncle, and up until that moment, I had been very proud of one specific achievement. I had never made things weird with Paige. That may sound small, it was not small. Paige was 26, a preschool teacher, and the only person I knew who could calmly handle 12 four-year-olds with glue sticks, but still panic if a moth got inside her apartment. We had been best friends for almost 3 years, long enough that she had a spare key to my place, long enough that I knew she hated being called sweetheart by men who didn't mean it kindly, long enough that she knew I kept a toolbox in my truck, but somehow never remembered to buy more paper towels, long enough that people had started asking questions, and long enough that I had learned to laugh them off before they landed too close to the truth. Because the truth was simple and inconvenient. I had feelings for Paige. Not the dramatic kind that made me stand outside her window with a boombox. I had the quieter, more dangerous kind. The kind that showed up when she tucked her hair behind her ear while reading a menu she already knew by heart. The kind that got worse when she laughed at my worst jokes. The kind that made me fix things at her apartment a little slower than necessary because being near her felt like standing in sunlight after a long winter. But Paige was my best friend. And I was not a reckless man. At least, I had been telling myself that. Wanda herself came over with 2 glasses of iced tea and a grin so wide it looked like she had been waiting years to use it. "Well, look at you two," she said, setting the glasses down. "Finally sitting on the same side of happiness." Paige blinked. "Wanda, what?" Wanda rested one hand on her hip. Everybody knew it was only a matter of time. "I told Ed last month," I said, "those two are either already dating or they're the slowest people in Ohio." I choked on absolutely nothing. Paige pressed her lips together, but a smile escaped anyway. "We're not," I started. That was when her sneaker touched mine under the table. Not a kick, not an accident. A light press. A warning. A request. Then Paige looked at me through her lashes, cheeks pink, eyes bright with something I couldn't name. "Don't correct her," she said softly. Wanda froze. I froze harder. Somewhere near the counter, a fork clattered against a plate. Wanda looked from Paige to me and then did what every small-town diner owner does when handed fresh gossip on a silver platter. She smiled like a woman who had just won bingo and found a $20 bill in the parking lot. "Well," she said, "I won't say a word," which meant the entire county would know by dinner. Wanda walked away humming, and I sat there staring at Paige like she had just rearranged all the furniture in my head. She reached for her iced tea, took one sip, and refused to meet my eyes. I leaned forward. "Paige, Adrian, you want to explain that?" "Not particularly. You just told the most dangerous woman in town not to correct the idea that we're dating." "She makes excellent pie. That is not a legal defense." Paige stirred her straw around her glass, the ice clicking against the sides. Maybe I'm tired of correcting people. That landed somewhere under my ribs. Outside, a pickup rolled slowly past the diner window. Inside, Wanda shouted an order through the little kitchen pass-through. The lunch crowd murmured around us, living ordinary lives while mine quietly tilted. I tried to smile. Tired of correcting people or tired of correcting that specific thing? Paige finally looked at me. For 2 years and 11 months, I had seen Paige Mercer in 100 different moods. sleepy at yard sales, furious at printer jams, triumphant after assembling a bookshelf with no leftover screws, tearful once in my truck after a parent at school called her just a babysitter, and I drove around with her until she was ready to go home. But I had never seen her look at me like that, like she was scared, like she was hoping, like she had already stepped off a ledge and was waiting to see if I would reach for her or pretend I hadn't noticed. "I don't know," she said. It was the least Paige answer she had ever given me. Paige always knew. She knew which hardware store had the good paintbrushes. She knew which kids needed extra patience before nap time. She knew exactly how long to microwave leftover pasta so the edges didn't turn into rubber. But now she didn't know. Or maybe she did, and that was the problem. I looked down at the table between us. Her hand was resting near the napkin dispenser, fingers curled lightly, nails painted pale lavender and chipped on one thumb. I remembered her doing that last Thursday at my kitchen table, painting them while I argued with a cabinet hinge. She had blown on her nails and said, "If you ever become famous for fixing squeaky doors, remember I supported you when you were nobody." And I had thought, with the force of a punch, I would marry that woman if she asked me in the middle of a hardware aisle. Then I had swallowed the thought because that was what I did. I swallowed things. My father had taught me that without meaning to. He had loved my mother loudly, promised her everything, then walked out when loving her became inconvenient. I had been 15, old enough to remember the sound of the door closing and young enough to decide feelings were dangerous if you let them drive. So with Paige, I had been careful, useful, steady, safe, and maybe, if I was honest, cowardly. Wanda returned with our usual order. A turkey club for Paige, a burger for me, fries between us because Paige always said she didn't want her own and then stole mine with no remorse. "On the house today," Wanda announced. "No," I said immediately. Wanda, we can pay." "Oh, hush." She winked at Paige. "First date special." Paige inhaled sharply. I stared at Wanda. Wanda stared back, enjoying herself far too much. "This isn't our first date," I said, then realized how that sounded. Paige's eyes flicked to mine. Wanda's eyebrows climbed. I cleared my throat. "I mean, not a date. Not that there have been other dates. Not that there couldn't be." Paige started laughing, not a polite laugh, a real one, the kind that made her shoulders shake and her eyes shine. "Wow," she said. "You are terrible under pressure." "I fix water heaters for a living. They don't usually ask me about my romantic history." Wanda patted my shoulder. "Honey, that answer was a confession with fries." Then she left us alone again. Paige reached for a fry. I moved the basket away. She gasped. "Cruel. Girlfriends get fries. Best friends steal them." The word hung there. Girlfriends. Paige's smile softened. "And what do fake girlfriends get?" I should have made a joke. I should have said, "A bill for emotional damages." Instead, I slid the basket back toward her and said, "First pick." Her fingers brushed mine when she took one. It was barely anything. A touch so small no one else would have noticed. But I felt it all the way up my arm. Paige did too. I knew because her breath caught, and for once she didn't cover it with a joke. The diner seemed to blur around us, the clink of dishes, the low hum of conversation, the smell of burgers and coffee and fried onions. All of it faded behind the sight of Paige sitting across from me, holding one fry like she had forgotten what food was for. Then the bell above the front door jingled. Paige glanced over my shoulder. Her expression changed. Not fear exactly. Recognition, pressure, a little embarrassment. I turned and saw Mrs. Mercer, Paige's mother, walking in with two women from her church group, all three of them pausing as Wanda pointed directly toward our booth with the subtlety of a parade marshal. Paige closed her eyes. "Oh no," she whispered. I looked back at her. "Your mom?" She opened one eye. "Remember when I said, 'Don't correct Wanda'?" Hard to forget. There may have been another reason. My stomach tightened, not in dread, but in that strange, electric way you feel when the road disappears right before a hill. Mrs. Mercer spotted us. Her face lit up. Paige reached across the table, took my hand, and threaded her fingers through mine like she had done it 100 times. Except she never had. Her palm was warm. Her grip was nervous. Her thumb moved once against my skin, and it nearly undid me. Adrian, she said under her breath, still smiling toward her approaching mother, please don't let go. I looked at our joined hands, then at Paige, then at the woman walking toward us with questions written all over her face. And for the first time in 3 years, I stopped pretending this was harmless. Paige, I whispered, what exactly did you just make me? Paige squeezed my hand once, not hard enough to hurt, just enough to say, please. So I stayed. Her mother arrived at our booth with the kind of delighted expression that made me understand instantly that Wanda had not simply pointed. Wanda had delivered a full weather report. Well, Mrs. Mercer said, looking at our joined hands, isn't this a sweet surprise? Paige sat straighter. Hi, Mom. Hello, sweetheart. Her mother turned to me. Adrian. Mrs. Mercer. Oh, don't start with that. You fixed my garbage disposal while I was in slippers and a bathrobe. We're past formal. One of the church ladies behind her made a tiny sound that might have been a cough or a prayer. Paige's fingers tightened around mine. I gave her mother a polite smile. Fair enough. Diane. Diane Mercer looked like Paige 15 years from now if Paige ever learned to stop carrying the weight of other people's expectations in her shoulders. Same brown eyes, same quick little smile. But Diane's gaze moved between us with practiced precision. So, she said, how long has this been going on? Paige opened her mouth. Nothing came out. That, more than anything, told me she was scared. Paige could explain glitter in a heating vent to a room full of angry parents. She could talk down a child having a meltdown over a broken crayon, like she was negotiating peace between nations. But when it came to her own heart, apparently, she misplaced the alphabet. I rubbed my thumb gently over the side of her hand. Her eyes flicked to mine. The whole thing was supposed to be pretend. I knew that. But the second her grip softened under mine, it stopped feeling like a performance. Not long, I said. It was the safest, honest lie I had ever told. Diane's smile grew. I knew it. Mom, Paige said, warning in her voice. What? A mother notices things. You once thought I was secretly engaged because I bought a new toaster. It was a very nice toaster. I almost laughed. Paige shot me a look. Don't you dare take her side, she muttered. I'm remaining neutral in the toaster matter. There is no neutral in the toaster matter. Diane watched us banter and her expression changed. Less teasing, more tender. Like she was seeing something she had hoped for but hadn't wanted to name. Well, she said softly, I'm happy for you both. That did it. Paige's smile wavered. For half a second, I thought she might correct everything right there. Tell her mother it was a misunderstanding, a diner joke, a harmless accident. Instead, she looked down at our hands. Then she said, Thanks, Mom. The words were quiet, but they landed like a door unlocking. Diane excused herself to sit at the counter with her friends, though she glanced back twice before ordering. Wanda gave me a thumbs up from behind the register. I considered crawling under the table. Paige released my hand slowly. Too slowly, like she was returning something she didn't want to give back. I flexed my fingers once, trying not to look like a man who had just been permanently altered by 10 minutes of hand-holding next to a basket of fries. Paige picked at the corner of her sandwich. I'm sorry. For what? For dragging you into that. You didn't drag me, you asked me not to let go. Her eyes lifted. I kept my voice low. There's a difference. A flush touched her cheeks again, softer this time. She looked out the window, where sunlight hit the chrome trim of a parked pickup. My mom has been worried about me. Because of the toaster engagement? Because I told her I was done dating for a while. I waited. Paige tore a small piece from her napkin, rolled it between her fingers. I didn't tell you because it wasn't a big dramatic thing. Just a bunch of little exhausting ones. Men who liked the idea of me being nice until I had opinions. Men who called my job adorable, like I spent all day finger painting instead of teaching tiny humans how to be people. Men who thought being patient meant I'd never get angry. There was no ex-boyfriend storming in, no villain. just the ordinary bruises people collected from being underestimated. That somehow made me angrier. You should get angry more, I said. Paige blinked. I mean it. You're terrifying when you're mad. I am not. You once made a school board member apologize to a janitor using only eye contact. He deserved it. That's what I'm saying. Terrifying. Her mouth twitched. You're trying to compliment me and somehow making me sound like a woodland curse. A respected woodland curse? She laughed, and the pressure eased. Then she looked at me in that way again, almost too direct. With you, I don't feel like I have to stay easy. My chest tightened. I wanted to say something careful, something that kept us balanced on the safe side of the line. Instead, I said, good. Her gaze dropped to my mouth for a fraction of a second. There are moments in life when a man learns exactly how much damage one fraction of a second can do. I reached for my glass because my hand needed a job. Paige noticed. Of course she did. Are you nervous? She asked. No. Adrian, I am handling this with incredible dignity. You just tried to drink from the straw wrapper. I looked down. The straw wrapper was, in fact, in my hand. Paige laughed so hard she had to cover her face. I deserved it. Honestly, I was grateful for it. Her laugh gave me somewhere to put the heat building under my ribs. When she lowered her hand, though, her expression had changed again. I didn't plan this, she said. Wanda said it, and for 1 second I wondered what would happen if we just didn't deny it. That's a dangerous game in this town. I know. By sunset, Mr. Abernathy at the feed store will be asking if we've picked a venue. He already thinks you're too skinny. He told me that while I was carrying a water heater. He shows affection through criticism. I smiled, then let it fade. Paige, is this about your mom worrying? Because I can play along for lunch, but I don't want to be used as a shield if it makes things messier for you. She flinched, not because I was cruel, because I was close. No, she said. Then, after a breath, not only. That hung between us. The diner kept moving around us. Wanda refilled tea. Someone at the counter complained about road construction. Diane's friends whispered with the subtlety of leaf blowers. But Paige and I had fallen into a pocket of quiet. Then what is it? I asked. She pressed her palms flat on the table as if bracing herself. I think I wanted to know what it would feel like. To have people think we're together? Her voice became smaller. To have you not deny it. I forgot every decent response I had ever learned. Paige gave a shaky little smile and looked away. Too honest? No. My voice came out rough. Just honest enough to make me stupid. That doesn't take much. There she is. She smiled, but her eyes were nervous. I should have told her then. I should have said I didn't deny it because I've wanted people to be right for longer than I can admit. I should have taken all the careful little bricks I had stacked between us and kicked them over. But friendship is not a cheap thing. You don't gamble it because your heart gets noisy in a diner. So I chose the next honest step instead of the whole cliff. Do you want me to keep pretending? I asked. Paige stared at me. I leaned in close enough that she stopped fidgeting with the napkin. Or do you want us to find out if we're pretending? Her lips parted. Before she could answer, Wanda appeared with a slice of cherry pie and 2 forks. Congratulations, Pie, she announced. Paige closed her eyes. Wanda. What? Couples share. We are not. Paige started. Then she stopped. Wanda saw it. I saw it. Paige definitely felt me seeing it. Wanda placed the pie in the center of the table with all the ceremony of a priest setting down a sacred object. Take your time. When she left, Paige stared at the pie. I picked up 1 fork and handed her the other. For the record, this is how rumors get federal funding. She took the fork, smiling despite herself. You don't have to do this. I know. You can still correct everyone. I know. You have an exit. I know, Paige. Her eyes lifted slowly. I held her gaze. I'm still here. The fork in her hand trembled once. Then she reached across the little space between us, scooped a bite of cherry pie, and held it out to me. It was such an ordinary gesture. Messy filling. Cheap diner fork. Sunlight on her wrist. But her face said it wasn't ordinary at all. I leaned forward and took the bite. Her eyes stayed on mine the whole time. The pie was too sweet. The moment was worse. By the time we left Wanda's, 3 people had congratulated us. One man had slapped me on the back hard enough to adjust my spine, and Diane had hugged Paige like she'd been waiting months to exhale. Outside, the afternoon was warm and bright. Paige and I stood beside my truck in the gravel lot, not touching now, which somehow felt more intimate than when we had been holding hands. She folded her arms. So? So? We may have a problem. Only one? She looked toward the diner window. Wanda and Diane were both watching us. Paige gave them a smile, then turned back to me, lowering her voice. My cousin's engagement party is next Saturday. I narrowed my eyes. Why did that sound like a trapdoor opening? Because my mother will be there. Of course. And Wanda's sister caters for my aunt. Naturally. And if I show up alone after today, my entire family will perform an emotional autopsy before dessert. I rubbed a hand over my jaw. Paige, I know it's ridiculous. It is. I'm not asking you to. Yes, you are. She winced. A little. I should have said no. A reasonable adult man would have said, let's clear this up now before it grows teeth. Instead, I looked at her standing there in the daylight, cheeks still pink, trying so hard to act casual while hope tugged at every edge of her. And I realized the trapdoor wasn't under my feet. It was in me. Paige took a breath. Will you come with me? As your fake boyfriend? She held my gaze, and this time she didn't smile. I don't know, she said. Maybe as the man who didn't let go. I didn't answer right away, not because I didn't want to say yes, because I wanted to say yes too quickly. Paige stood beside my truck with her arms folded, pretending the question hadn't cost her anything. Behind her, Wanda's diner gleamed in the afternoon sun like the headquarters of a small-town intelligence agency. I looked through the window and saw Wanda and Diane turn away at the exact same time. Subtle, I said. Paige glanced back and groaned. They're going to need neck braces from pretending not to watch. I leaned against my truck. If I come with you next Saturday, we need rules. Rules? Yes. Fake boyfriend rules. Something flickered across her face at the word fake, but she nodded. Fine. Rule 1? No calling me Snookums. I have never once called you Snookums. I'm preventing future damage. Noted. Rule 2? No elaborate backstory. We are not saying I proposed during a hot air balloon accident or that we fell in love over competitive clog dancing. Paige's mouth curved. There goes my whole plan. Rule 3? I tried to keep my tone light, but it came out quieter. If either of us gets uncomfortable, we say so. Her smile softened. That's a good rule. And rule 4? I stopped. Because the rule I wanted was dangerous. No pretending more than we have to. No touching unless you mean it. No looking at me like that unless you want me to forget why we're doing this. Paige waited. I looked down at the gravel, then back at her. Rule 4 is we don't lie to each other after. Whatever happens there, we talk about it. For once, she didn't tease me. Okay, she said. That one matters. So I said yes. For the next week, our friendship became a strange little stage play where neither of us knew which lines were fake. She came by the shop on Tuesday with sandwiches because she said I sounded tragically underfed on the phone. My Uncle Ray watched her set the paper bag on my workbench, watched me wipe my hands twice before taking it, then announced he had to go check inventory in a supply closet we both knew contained nothing but old invoices and a broken fan. Paige looked after him. Does he always flee like a guilty raccoon? Only when he's about to gossip. Should we give him something good? I glanced at her. Careful. Her eyes sparked. What? Fake boyfriend nervous? I'm real nervous. That's the issue. The words slipped out before I could sand the edges off. Paige went still. There were cars waiting in the lot, a compressor humming in the corner, sunlight sliding over oil stains on the concrete. Not romantic by any sane standard. And yet there she was, standing close enough that I could see a tiny smear of mustard on her thumb from making the sandwiches, looking at me like she was deciding whether to step closer or run. I reached out, took her hand, and wiped the mustard away with a clean shop rag. It was practical. It was also not practical at all. You had mustard, I said. Thank goodness you saved me from public shame. I'm a hero that way. Her voice dropped. Adrian. I looked up. Her hand was still in mine. For a second, neither of us moved. Then the bell over the shop door rang, and Mrs. Daly walked in needing a new brake light and bringing, somehow, the entire weight of Briar Falls gossip with her. Paige pulled her hand back, but she smiled all the way to the door. By Saturday, I had changed shirts 4 times, which was absurd because the engagement party was in Paige's aunt's backyard, not a royal wedding. I settled on dark jeans and a navy button-down my mother said made me look less like I wrestled appliances for money. Paige picked me up because she said arriving together would reduce family speculation velocity. She wore a rust-colored sundress with flat sandals and a denim jacket. Casual, simple, nothing glamorous. It nearly killed me. When she got out of her little white hatchback in front of my place, I actually forgot to lock my door. She noticed. You okay? Yes. You just pointed your keys at the mailbox and clicked unlock. The mailbox looked suspicious. She laughed and some of my nerves loosened. The party was exactly what I expected. Folding tables, paper plates, kids running through sprinklers at the edge of the yard, a cooler full of soda, and every relative Paige had ever mentioned turning to look at us like we were the evening's main course. Her cousin Brianna, the bride-to-be, hugged Paige first, then me. So you're Adrian, she said, grinning. That depends on what you've heard. That you can fix anything except your own romantic life. Paige made a choking sound. I looked at her. Your family is aggressive. You agreed to come. I didn't know there would be organized heckling. She slipped her hand into mine. This time, no one had forced it. Her palm fit against mine with an ease that made me quiet. We moved through the yard like that. She introduced me to aunts, uncles, cousins, a grandfather who asked if I owned a torque wrench before he asked my last name. I answered questions. Paige answered more. Every time someone teased her, she leaned into me just a little, and every time she did, I had to remind myself to breathe normally. At one point, we ended up at a folding table with lemonade and little sandwiches. Paige picked a cucumber one, took a bite, and immediately frowned. What? I asked. There's dill. You hate dill. I respect dill's right to exist away from me. I took the sandwich from her hand and traded it with my ham and cheese before I thought better of it. She stared at me. What? You remembered. You once gave a 10-minute speech in the grocery aisle about dill being an herb with boundary issues. That was a powerful speech. It moved me, deeply. Her smile went soft around the edges. Not playful, not fake. Then her aunt called her over to help with a tray, and Paige gave my hand one quick squeeze before leaving. I stood near the lemonade table, trying to look like a normal man and not someone who had just been undone by herb-related intimacy. That was when I heard Diane's voice from the other side of the tall lilac bush beside the patio. I'm not saying I'm not happy, she said quietly. I am. I just hope it's real, another woman answered, probably Paige's aunt. They look real to me. Diane sighed. Paige has always made herself useful to people who don't see her. With Adrian, she smiles differently. I noticed it months ago. I should have moved away. Eavesdropping is not a noble hobby. But then Diane said my name. And him? The aunt asked. He looks at her like he's afraid wanting her will ruin the best thing he has. My throat tightened. There are things you don't know about yourself until someone says them from behind a bush at an engagement party. Diane continued, softer now. Paige told me once that Adrian was the first man who made quiet feel safe instead of empty. I don't think she meant to say it. But I remembered. I stood there with a plastic cup of lemonade in my hand, suddenly unable to feel my fingers. The first man who made quiet feel safe instead of empty. Paige had never told me that. I looked across the yard and found her carrying a tray of deviled eggs, laughing at something her cousin said. The sun caught her hair. A little kid bumped into her knee and she steadied the tray with one hand and the child with the other, never missing a beat. I wanted her so badly in that moment it stopped feeling like fear. It felt like a decision. Then Brianna clinked a spoon against her glass and called everyone over for a toast. We gathered near the patio. Paige found me in the crowd and slipped beside me close enough that our shoulders touched. "You disappeared," she whispered. "I was by the lemonade." "Suspicious mailbox, suspicious lemonade. Big day for you." I looked down at her, and whatever she saw in my face made her smile fade. "What?" she asked. Before I could answer, Brianna raised her glass. "To love," she said, smiling at her fiancé. "To finding the person who knows you're weird and stays anyway." People laughed. Then Brianna turned toward us with the expression of a woman about to commit a felony in broad daylight. "And apparently," she added, "to Paige and Adrian, who have been emotionally married for 2 years and finally decided to stop insulting our intelligence." The yard exploded. People clapped. Someone whistled. Wanda's sister, holding a tray near the back, yelled, "Called it!" Paige went bright red. I felt her hand tense in mine. This was the moment to laugh it off, to correct everyone, to rescue the friendship before the town built a wedding registry. But then Paige looked up at me, not asking me to perform, asking me to choose. So I turned to the crowd, lifted our joined hands slightly, and said, "For the record, I'm only emotionally married to her on weekdays. Weekends are still under negotiation." The laughter came easy. Paige's shoulders relaxed. Then she surprised me. She rose on her toes and kissed my cheek. Not long, not dramatic, but warm enough that every thought in my head scattered like birds. The crowd cheered louder. Paige lowered herself back down, still blushing, still holding my hand. "Negotiation tactic," she whispered. I leaned close to her ear. "Effective." Her breath caught. The party moved on around us, but something had shifted. We weren't playing the same game anymore, and both of us knew it. A few minutes later, when everyone drifted toward the dessert table, Paige tugged me gently toward the side gate. "Walk with me?" she asked. We slipped out to the narrow lane behind the house, where the noise softened behind the fence and the afternoon air smelled like cut grass and charcoal smoke. Paige walked beside me, not touching now, her arms wrapped around herself. "That got out of hand," she said. "A little. I'm sorry. You keep apologizing for things I'm choosing." She stopped. So did I. The lane was quiet except for a dog barking somewhere down the block and the muffled laughter from the party. Paige looked at me. "What did you hear by the lemonade?" I could have lied. I almost did. Then I remembered Rule 4. "We don't lie after," I said. Her face changed. "Adrian, I heard your mom say I look at you like I'm afraid wanting you will ruin the best thing I have." Paige went completely still. I stepped closer, slow enough that she could step back if she wanted. She didn't. "And I heard what you said about me," I added. "About quiet." Her eyes filled, but she didn't look away. "That was private," she whispered. "I know. I didn't mean for you to hear it." "I know." Her voice shook. But it was true. The words opened something in me I had kept locked for years. I reached for her hand and she gave it to me immediately. No audience, no Wanda, no mother, no fake anything. Just Paige and me in a narrow lane behind a family party holding the truth between us like it might burn. I said, "Then I need to tell you something before we go back in." She swallowed. "Okay." But before I could speak, Paige lifted her free hand and placed her fingers lightly against my chest, right over my heart. "Wait," she said, barely above a whisper. "If you're about to say what I think you're about to say, don't make it sound like part of the act." I covered her hand with mine, and for the first time all day I knew exactly what I wanted to say. It never was. Paige's fingers pressed against my chest like she was trying to feel whether I meant it. I did. That was the problem, and the answer. The party murmured behind the fence. Somewhere, Brianna laughed. A paper plate hit the ground and a child shouted like civilization had collapsed. But in that narrow lane, Paige and I stood in a quiet so complete it felt built for us. She searched my face. "Never?" I shook my head. "Not today." Her breath trembled. "And not last Tuesday when you brought sandwiches to the shop," I said. "Not when you kissed my cheek in front of your entire family like you were trying to stop my heart with witnesses." Not when I told Wanda we weren't on our first date and immediately sounded like a man confessing to several crimes. A watery laugh slipped out of her. I kept going because if I stopped, fear might find the door again. And not all the other times either. When you fell asleep on my couch during that terrible documentary about competitive pumpkin growing and woke up mad at me because I let the pumpkin guy win, he cheated. He absolutely cheated. Her smile broke through, then faded into something softer. When you called me after that school board meeting, I said, and tried to pretend you weren't crying. When you showed up with paint samples for my office because you said beige was where hope went to die. When you remembered my mom's birthday because I was acting like I didn't care, even though you knew I did. Paige's eyes shone. I took one more step closer. I've wanted you for a while, Paige. Not because people tease us, not because your mom wants it, not because Wanda has apparently declared herself mayor of our relationship. That got a real laugh. I smiled, but my voice stayed honest. I want you because you make ordinary days feel like they have a pulse. Because you tell the truth even when your voice shakes. Because you see parts of me I thought I'd hidden better. Her hand flattened more firmly against my heart. Adrian, she whispered. And I was scared, I admitted. Not of you, of losing you, of becoming the kind of man who reaches for something good and breaks it because he doesn't know how to hold on. Paige's expression changed then. She wasn't just listening, she was choosing what to do with me. You are not your father, she said. The words hit so cleanly I almost looked away. She didn't let me. Her hand moved from my chest to my cheek, gentle but firm. You don't leave when things become inconvenient, she said. You stay until the warped step is fixed. Until the kid who dropped her cupcake stops crying. Until my ceiling fan stops sounding like a helicopter trying to escape. You stay so much that sometimes I want to shake you and tell you staying quietly is not the same as asking for what you want. My throat tightened. Consider me shaken, I said. Her thumb brushed my jaw. Good. I leaned my forehead against hers. It was the closest we had ever been on purpose. Paige, I said, if we do this, I don't want fake. I don't want convenient. I don't want being shoved together by diner gossip and family jokes. Then what do you want? You, on purpose. Her eyes closed. For one awful second, I thought I had gone too far. Then she whispered, finally. That one word ruined me. I kissed her. Not for the crowd, not to prove anything, not as part of a story everyone else had written around us. I kissed her because she was Paige and she had asked me not to make it an act. Her hands slid up to my shoulders. Mine settled carefully at her waist, giving her every chance to pull away. She didn't. She kissed me like she had been holding back the same breath I had. Soft at first, then certain. Familiar and new all at once. Like finding a door in a house you'd lived in for years. When we broke apart, she stayed close, her forehead against mine. Both of us breathing like we had run a mile instead of crossed one line. Well, she said. I laughed under my breath. That's your review? I'm processing. Take your time. I may need a second sample for research purposes. I kissed her again. This one was shorter, sweeter, and ended because Paige started smiling against my mouth. I have notes, she said. Of course you do. Less fear, more confidence. I'll work on that. And maybe don't confess your feelings next to somebody's recycling bins again. I glanced over her shoulder at the blue bins lined against the fence. That's fair. She laughed, and then, because the universe has a sense of timing, the side gate creaked open. Brianna stood there holding 2 paper cups of lemonade. She saw our closeness, saw my hand at Paige's waist, saw Paige's hand still curled in my shirt. Her eyes went wide. Oh, she said. Paige stepped back so fast she nearly tripped over a crack in the pavement. I caught her by the elbow. Brianna's grin turned wicked. I brought drinks, she said, lifting the cups. But apparently you found refreshment. Brianna, Paige groaned. I'm leaving. I saw nothing except everything. Please don't announce this. Brianna looked offended. I would never. Paige narrowed her eyes. I would never loudly announce this, Brianna amended. I took 1 cup from her. Thank you for your restraint. You're welcome, emotionally married man. Then she disappeared back through the gate, practically vibrating with information. Paige covered her face. We have maybe 4 minutes before the entire party knows. 3 if she runs. She ran cross-country. So, 2. Paige lowered her hands. Her cheeks were flushed, her mouth a little swollen from kissing me, her eyes bright with panic and happiness. The sight nearly knocked me sideways. What do we do? She asked. I took her hand. It felt different now. Not pretend, not borrowed. Ours. We go back in, I said. And? And we stop letting everyone else decide what we are before we do. Her fingers tightened around mine. Meaning? Meaning if someone asks, we tell them the truth. The truth that we kissed behind the recycling bins? I was thinking the truth that we're figuring this out. She made a face. That sounds like a corporate email. Fine. The truth that I'm taking you to dinner tomorrow. Her eyebrows lifted. You are? Yes. Bold. I received feedback about confidence. Where? By the bins. Very reputable source. She smiled, but something uncertain moved through her eyes. Adrian, if we walk in there and tell them this is real, there's no quietly going back. I don't want to quietly go back. Her lips parted. I turned her hand over and pressed a kiss to her knuckles. It was a small thing, maybe old-fashioned, maybe ridiculous. But Paige went still, like it had reached somewhere deeper than her skin. I'm scared too, I said. But I'm more scared of sitting across from you at Wanda's 6 months from now pretending I don't remember how you kissed me. She looked down at our hands. Then she smiled. Dinner tomorrow, she said, but not Wanda's. Afraid of the surveillance? Wanda would bring binoculars to our table. She already has our table bugged with pie. Paige laughed, then tugged me toward the gate. We walked back into the party hand in hand. The conversation dipped almost immediately because subtlety had apparently been banned in Paige's bloodline. Diane saw us first. Then Brianna. Then one aunt whispered to another, and the whisper moved through the yard like wind through dry leaves. Paige stood beside me, shoulders tense. I leaned down. You okay? She looked up at me. Ask me again after my mother's face stops doing that. Diane's face was doing several things. Joy, suspicion, hope. The dangerous softness of a mother trying not to push too hard. Brianna appeared with a fresh spoon and a glass, eyes gleaming. No, Paige said immediately. I didn't say anything. You were about to. Brianna sighed. Fine, but I need clarification for seating charts in the future. I cleared my throat before Paige could combust. We're not announcing an engagement. Several relatives groaned with exaggerated disappointment. But, I said, and Paige's hand went still in mine, I am taking Paige on a real date tomorrow. The yard quieted. Not completely. There were still kids near the sprinkler, and someone's uncle coughed like he'd swallowed a chip whole. But the adults looked at us differently. Not as a joke now, not as gossip. As something beginning. Paige stared at me, surprised even though I had just told her. Then she leaned into my side, her shoulder fitting under my arm like she had always belonged there. And I said yes, she added. Diane pressed one hand to her mouth. Wanda's sister whispered, I knew it, with religious conviction. Brianna lifted her lemonade. To the slowest people in Ohio. Everybody laughed and raised their cups. I looked down at Paige. She was laughing too, but there were tears in her eyes. I brushed one away with my thumb before I could overthink it. The whole yard saw. Paige didn't hide. That was when I knew the pretending was over. Later, after cake and too many jokes and Paige's grandfather cornering me to discuss torque wrenches with alarming intensity, she and I slipped out to the front porch for a breath. The sun was lower now, gold on the street, the air still warm. Paige sat on the porch step. I sat beside her, close enough our knees touched. So, she said, bumping my knee with hers, real date tomorrow. Real date? Are you going to be awkward? Almost certainly. Good. I'd hate for fame to change you. I smiled, then looked at her more seriously. Are you happy? She nodded, but the answer took a second. I'm happy. I'm also terrified. Me too. She rested her head on my shoulder. It was the simplest gesture in the world. It felt bigger than the kiss. For a few minutes, we just sat there, listening to her family inside the fence, letting the day settle around us. Then Paige said, Adrian? Yeah? If tomorrow goes well. I waited. She lifted her head and looked at me with that same brave, nervous hope from the diner. Can we tell Wanda she was right? I smiled. Before I could answer, the porch door opened behind us, and Diane stepped out holding Paige's denim jacket. Her eyes moved from Paige's head near my shoulder to our joined hands. Then she said softly, I don't mean to interrupt, but I think the two of you and I need to have one honest conversation before you leave. Paige went still beside me. I felt it through our joined hands. Diane must have seen it too because her expression softened immediately. She held out the denim jacket like a peace offering. I'm not here to interrogate you, she said. Paige took the jacket but didn't put it on. Mom, if this is about the party, it's about me, Diane said. That surprised both of us. She sat on the porch step above ours, close enough to be part of the circle, far enough not to crowd us. For a moment, she looked out at the quiet street instead of at Paige. When your father and I split, she said, I leaned on you too much. Paige's face changed. Mom, I did. You were 16 and I was hurt, and you became my little adult before you should have had to. Diane swallowed. So when I worry about you now, I know it sometimes comes out as pressure. Who are you seeing? Are you happy? Are you alone too much? I don't mean to make you perform happiness for me. Paige's fingers tightened around mine. I didn't speak. This was not my wound to explain. Diane looked at her daughter then. If what happened today started because you felt cornered by my worrying, I'm sorry. Paige blinked hard. It didn't, she said, voice thin. Diane waited. Paige took a breath. Maybe a little at first, but not after. Her thumb moved over my knuckle. I loved that tiny motion more than any public announcement. Diane's eyes lowered to our hands, then returned to Paige's face. And now? Paige looked at me. There was no panic in her eyes this time. Still fear, yes, but the kind that stands beside hope instead of blocking it. Now, she said, I think I'm done pretending I don't want him. My heart did something embarrassing. Diane pressed her lips together, but the smile got through. Good. Paige laughed shakily. That's it? That's it. Diane stood. Well, almost. Adrian? I straightened like I had been called to the principal's office. Yes? If you hurt her, I will be disappointed in you. That was somehow worse than a threat. I understand. And Paige? Yeah? If you get scared, don't punish him for being brave enough to stay. Paige looked down, then she nodded. Diane kissed the top of her head, patted my shoulder, and went back inside. For a while, Paige and I stayed on the steps. She's good at that, I said finally. Emotional ambushes? Parenting with surgical precision. Paige leaned her shoulder into mine. She likes you. I was hoping for tolerated. No, she likes you. And you? She turned her face toward me. Fishing for compliments already? I'm new to this. I need encouragement. Paige smiled, then kissed me softly right there on her aunt's front porch, with her family laughing in the backyard and my hand still wrapped around hers. When she pulled back, she whispered, I more than like you. I slept badly that night, which felt unfair because I was happy. Apparently, happiness can keep a man awake just as effectively as dread. Our first real date was the next evening at a little pizza place 2 towns over because Paige said we needed neutral territory beyond Wanda's operational range. We sat in a corner booth under a crooked baseball poster and split a mushroom pizza because she trusted mushrooms but distrusted olives on moral grounds. I was awkward. Not charming awkward. Full awkward. I knocked my fork off the table. I complimented her earrings twice. I asked if she was having a nice time while she was actively laughing at something I said, which answered the question. Paige loved every second of it. You're nervous, she said, grinning. I am on a date with the woman who once saw me fall through a porch step and still agreed to be seen with me. You only went in up to one knee. That porch tried to eat me. She reached across the table and took my hand. Adrian. I looked at her, her smile softened. I'm having a wonderful time. That settled me. After dinner, we walked around the little town square while the shops closed and the sky turned peach behind the courthouse. No rain, no dramatic music, just evening traffic, warm pavement, and Paige's hand slipping into mine like it had finally stopped asking permission. At her car, she turned to me. So, she said, second date? Too soon to ask? Not if you're confident. I stepped closer. Paige Mercer, will you go on a second date with me? She pretended to think. Only if there are no olives. Hard boundary, understood. Then she kissed me like the answer had never been in doubt. The strange part was how little changed after that, and how much. She still came by the shop with lunch sometimes, but now she kissed me hello if Uncle Ray wasn't looking, and sometimes even if he was. I still fixed things at her apartment, but now she sat on the counter and distracted me on purpose, swinging her feet and asking if handsome repairman was an official job title. We still argued about movies. We still stole fries. We still had quiet nights on my couch. But the quiet was different. It wasn't waiting anymore. It was arriving. A month later, we went back to Wanda's diner as a real couple. Wanda saw us walk in holding hands and stopped mid-pour over Mr. Abernathy's coffee until it nearly overflowed. I knew it, she said. Paige pointed at her. You get one gloat. Wanda put a hand to her chest. One? I raised this relationship from infancy. You served pie and committed gossip. Said. That is how half the marriages in this town begin. She gave us the back booth. Of course she did. Paige slid in across from me, then paused. What? I asked. She stood back up, moved around the table, and sat beside me instead. My chest warmed in a way I couldn't hide. Wanda appeared 2 seconds later with cherry pie and 2 forks. On the house, she said. I sighed. This is entrapment. Paige took a fork, smiling. No, this is tradition. 6 months later, Paige had a drawer at my place, though she claimed it was not a drawer, merely fabric-based territory. By the following spring, I had learned that living with a preschool teacher meant finding stickers in impossible places. One morning, I went to work with a tiny glitter dinosaur stuck to the back of my hoodie. Uncle Ray noticed before I did and refused to let me remove it, saying it improved my customer relations. Paige moved in officially that summer. Not because we were rushing, because one evening she stood in my kitchen holding a box of her books and said, half my life is already here, and your porch steps are finally safe. I took the box from her. Is that your romantic speech? I can add music. I accept the original version. We weren't perfect. We had our first real fight over my habit of going quiet when I was overwhelmed. Paige didn't let me disappear inside myself, and I had to learn that being steady didn't mean being silent. She had to learn that asking for reassurance wasn't weakness. We learned. We kept choosing. A year after that afternoon at Wanda's, I took Paige back to the diner before opening. Wanda let me in early because, according to her, she was contractually obligated by fate. The sun was just coming up, turning the windows gold. Paige sat in the back booth, sleepy and suspicious, wearing one of my sweatshirts over leggings. Why are we here before pancakes are emotionally available? She asked. I sat across from her and slid a small velvet box onto the table. Her mouth parted. I thought about doing this somewhere fancy, I said, but this is where you asked me not to correct the best mistake anyone ever made about us. Her eyes filled. So I'm asking you on purpose. My voice shook and I let it. Will you marry me? Paige looked at the box, then at me. You're sure? She whispered. I smiled. Less fear, more confidence, very reputable source. She laughed through tears, then she came around the booth, slid onto my side, and kissed me before she even said yes. For the record, she did say yes. Wanda cried. Mr. Abernathy walked in early, saw the ring, and told me I still looked too skinny to be engaged. Paige told him love had nothing to do with upper body mass. He said he'd bring us a casserole anyway. We got married the next fall in Diane's backyard, under string lights and a maple tree that dropped leaves into everyone's drinks. Brianna gave a toast calling us the slowest people in Ohio. Uncle Ray wore a tie with tiny wrenches on it. Wanda brought cherry pie instead of a cake topper. At the end of the night, Paige and I sat on the porch steps, her dress gathered around her knees, my jacket over her shoulders. She leaned her head against me. "Remember when this was fake?" she asked. I kissed her hair. "No." She smiled. "Liar." "Fine, I remember, but I like this version better." Across the yard, our families danced badly under the lights. Wanda was teaching Diane some move that should probably have required a permit. Paige slipped her hand into mine, her wedding ring cool against my skin, and I thought about that first afternoon in the diner. Her blush, her smile, her brave little sentence. Don't correct her. Sometimes love doesn't arrive with thunder. Sometimes it shows up in a sticky booth, with fries in the middle and your best friend asking you not to deny what your heart already knows. What would you have done if your best friend was mistaken for your partner in a small town diner and quietly asked you not to correct it? And have you ever had everyone else notice your feelings before you were brave enough to admit them? Tell me your story in the comments. And for those who'd like to be a little closer to us, we've opened memberships where you'll get shorter exclusive stories every week with no ads. If you like this one, leave a like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.